Welcome back to Shattered Silence. My name is Jori. I spoke with our guest David today a little bit about addiction, recovery, the struggles, your family, but not only that, your recovery, your success, and your growth. So I hope you guys all enjoy the episode. Well, David, thank you for being here with me.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I just want to start because I've been thinking like so much about this episode with you, and I just think it's so cool that you're willing to share your story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, it's, I know it's got to be a hard thing sometimes to share your story and be vulnerable like that. But I think it's so cool that you can come in, share your story just to kind of bring this awareness. Like, that's what we've kind of just been trying to do is just kind of spread the awareness and that there can be success.
Yeah, and the hope is to be able to provide someone else some hope.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Because it was somebody else kind of sharing their story that helped me see the similarities, you know, and that provided that little bit of hope that I needed too. So that's the goal. You know?
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's like, I mean, I don't know any of your story.
Right.
So I'm excited to hear your story and how you kind of turned your life around. So I want you to share anything and everything that you feel comfortable with sharing.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, to put it in a nutshell, I had grown up around a lot of drugs and alcohol. Didn't grow up in the best environment. And I had promised myself as a kid that I wouldn't let it happen to me, you know, which shows you the power of these things when they actually take a hold of your life.
Right.
Because I completely ditched all those promises that I made to myself, right?
Yeah.
And to be quite honest, it started all as fun, which is the most kind of deceptive thing. It was all a good time. It was like celebration. I had a great career going, and you know, it's what we did to celebrate. You know, drinking is what we did to celebrate, and then little by little leads to other things, and it's like quicksand. Before I knew it, I was too far in and too deep, and like the more you try to get out, the worse it gets. But I really wasn't trying to get out. It was just a lot of movement, you know, and no progress. But for me, it really just started that way. It started off as a good time, you know, and it didn't really have this. It didn't really have like this lurking notion of, hey, a downfall's on its way. You know?
Were you pretty young?
No, I was actually what people would call a late bloomer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I got married really young, about 20 years old, and I was never kind of quote unquote in the party scene, right? Then, you know, went through a divorce, and, you know, it was in my really late 20s, like right on the cusp of 30, where I started drinking regularly, and then that led to other things, obviously. And so I was kind of a late bloomer, you know, but it doesn't care.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say is
the struggle with addiction doesn't care how old you are. It's no respecter of persons, you know, so 100%. Doesn't care how successful you are, how unsuccessful you are, what your background is, what your plans are. It's just, it got a hold of me at that point in my life, and things got really, really, really dark.
Right. Yeah. And I just feel like there's such this like stigma, I guess, where it's like people think, oh, you start young when you're partying and you're going out and you're experimenting and all this stuff. So I think it's also important to see that it really can affect so many different people, all walks of life, you know, and just like bringing in like my story a little bit, it's like, yeah, Kyle and I like just got engaged, you know what I mean? Like our life looked from the outside, I guess, it looked like we were just beginning our life together, you know? And so it's like, it just doesn't matter. There's that like, you know, it really can take a hold of anybody.
Yeah, it really can. And it's just really something to tread lightly with, you know, because people don't know how they're going to react to certain things, you know. I mean, there's a lot of levity in my story because I look back and I'm grateful. But I always say that it was like, they're like, well, how come, because people didn't understand, just like I didn't understand. Why can't you just stop? You know, why can't you just stop? And it's like the guys would be like, hey, let's go grab a drink on Friday. And before I know it, it's Tuesday. And for whatever reason, I just wasn't the person that could like start and stop with like my choice, even though I
Right.
had things to do like work and stuff like
Right.
that. So that's when I really started to notice that, hey, this is a lot stronger than me, you know, and I think that people just feel like if they throw their will at it stronger, they'll be better. But in me personally, it's like the more I fought, the more I lost, you know, and it's something that as a man or any person, we just don't want to talk about our losses. It's kind of like a
Yeah.
bad gambler, you know.
Yeah.
You only talk about the times you win, you know.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to talk about my losses, so I was in denial. I didn't want to let anybody know I had a problem. So I tried my best to cover it up, but
Right.
before you know it, it becomes too evident
Right.
to hide.
Right. And I know that at one point, you know, with Kyle and dealing with his addiction a little
Yeah.
bit, it was more like, you know, he tried to hide it. There
Yeah.
was no way he wanted to reach out to me or any of his family because he was embarrassed about it, you know, and it's
Yeah.
like that certain point where you're just like, I don't know, we eventually did talk about it, you know,
Yeah.
but it's like, how am I supposed to come to you with this? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to let you down, you know what I
Right,
mean? And
right.
so I know it's got to be a struggle, and I don't personally like know that side of it, you know.
Yeah.
Like I don't know that side, like
Yeah.
your side of it. So
It's definitely a struggle because I know for a fact that it's happened with me and talking with a lot of people in recovery. There's a lot of like quiet desperation, you know, meaning only things that you're going through, only things that you stay up at night thinking about, being in a room full of people but still feeling completely alone. And then what starts to happen, and my journey's been really spiritual, so, you know, I'm going to share my faith. But
Oh,
for
absolutely.
me, the enemy has us right where he wants us when we feel like we're alone, right? When we feel like we're alone. And, you know, that's kind of what drugs and alcohol end up doing to people if they let it take over their life. It's
Right.
like this complete separation from everything you know, everything you love, and everything that God really has in store for you.
Right. And you kind of shared like how you really saw it starting to affect your life.
Yeah.
So once you kind of like realize that it's like affecting you in that way, like what steps did you take to like start
Well,
getting
it kind of
help?
goes in stages, right? It goes in stages where I'm having fun, I'm doing my thing, leave me alone, right? My dad tried to warn me. Then this stage where like people are telling you, hey, you think you got a problem? And I'm like, no, you're crazy. And then this stage of like, hey, maybe they're right. And then it's like, you know, like, hey, something has to change. And then it comes to like where you want to change, and then it's like separate where you need to change. And then there's
Right.
this darkest moment where you want to and you need to, but you just can't.
Yeah.
And you definitely need some help, you know. And you know, I grew up with not admitting defeat. I grew up not you know, being told that like, hey, you never surrender at all, ever, you know. And this whole thought, this whole idea of the way you win is by admitting you lost. It was so foreign to me, you know. So it's something that I struggled with, and I think that a lot of people struggle with.
Right.
The only difference now, I guess, is that we live in a time right now where accidental overdose is a huge thing, you know, and a lot of the times you don't even know what you're messing with, and you think you're having
I
fun,
know.
and next thing you know, it just happens,
Yeah.
you know. So we can't be playing with that fire.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you bringing that up, like now it's like all this accidental like overdoses with like fentanyl. It's
Yeah.
like I just think about like all of our like youth.
Yeah.
Like you see it so much more in like high schools and stuff, and it's like that's one of the reasons too that I want people to talk about
Yeah,
it
100%.
because I mean I remember, you know, doing the DARE and everything,
Yeah.
the DARE program and
We
everything.
let that little lion down, didn't
Yeah.
we? Remember that little lion on the T-shirt? We let him down, man. Poor guy.
I know.
It's like, just
And
say
so,
no.
but it's like, I don't know, you can talk about it and you can tell kids how like dangerous it is, and just like you're like, I told myself I wasn't going to do it.
Yeah.
And then you just kind of get caught up and you kind of experiment a little bit and then you're kind of sucked in and you're stuck, you know? Did you ever actually go to get, go to a
So
recovery
my
center?
story is like, I was out of options. Okay. I'm very active in 12-step recovery. But at that point, I was completely out of options. I was at the point where I knew I needed to stop. I desperately wanted to stop. Like, if you put a lie detector test on me, I would have passed it. Every time I told my loved ones, that is it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it anymore. Because I desperately didn't want to. I meant it. Right. But by that point, I was too far in the grasp of something that was so much stronger than me. And I'll be honest with you, I wish that I could say that, I went to rehab because I wanted to be a good husband one day or a good father. I already had kids.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wish I could say that I wanted to be a good father, a good husband one day, a good employee, let alone an employer, that I wanted to be a good man. But to be quite honest with you, I was just out of options entirely. And I was emotionally, mentally, physically just exhausted.
Right.
I got a nice little nudge she's my wife now, but my girlfriend at the time. And she had dropped me off at like 3 different rehabs.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and
she's like, you have no options.
Yeah, and and it starts with like we tend to kind of like do this for someone else, but in the beginning part of that journey, you really start to see that you're doing it for yourself, but not in a selfish way. But you're doing it for yourself because it's really a journey that's on your own at first, you think, and then you realize that God's there, and then the benefits of that are your loved ones, right? So it started off like, because she looked at me and said, "Hey, if you don't stay here, don't call me." And like
it's tough love.
Yes,
right?
yeah. And tough love is tougher on people that give it than people that get it. So I'm sure she didn't want to say that. I'm sure she's pregnant with my child at the time.
Right. Yeah.
She didn't want to look at the father of her unborn child and say, "Hey, if you don't stay here, don't call me." Right. So I got that little nudge enough to like stay a day, stay a couple days, and then get introduced to 12-step recovery, and then that journey started. But like I said, I wish it was something that I can say, hey, I'm just going to turn my life around. Right. I was just done. Right. Life had really given me that right butt kicking. Yeah. Where it was like not too bad, not too bad where I can't do anything about it, but strong enough to make me kind of like wake up, and it's just like this little moment of clarity in the midst of a storm where you can say, okay, whatever it is that's going on here, like I'm open. Right. Yeah. And I'm sure like when you first like get to recovery and you get that tough love, you're kind of, I'm assuming you're kind of in like a dark place. Oh, and you're like, it's actually for me the lowest point was that beginning part. Yeah. So like, can you tell us about like your first steps in recovery and how you kind of felt when you first got there? People always ask about like, what was your rock bottom, and rock bottoms are really relative, Some people are homeless, some people still go home to a beautiful home and a family, and it's not so much rock bottom on the outside, but my emotional and mental and spiritual rock bottom was actually like my first 60 days in recovery. Okay. And not that recovery didn't work or anything like that. Right. It's just that I was, and I don't want to say 60 days in recovery, 60 days sober. Okay. Because I was used to numbing everything away. Right. And for the first time, I started to feel everything. And then that regret, that guilt, that shame just sets in heavy. Right. And I no longer have that medicine that helped me get rid of it. Right. I'm sure when your head kind of clears up a little bit. Oh, man, like, it's the worst, and then it's so weird. I had lost it all. I did well for myself before that. I had a great career, had everything on the outside that everybody would think that they want, the home, the family, the career, all of it. And there I was at also a physical rock bottom, right? Financially, everything. And still mustered up enough pride to be like, I don't want to do this, know? It's so weird how we could be like deflated, but our ego is still there. Right. And that journey was a lot of me just, I could say the biggest thing that it is, I just stopped running. Right? And I didn't stop running because I wanted to. I was just tired. Right. Yeah. I spent most of my my time out there just kind of running away from my problems, running away from responsibilities, and in denial about my present, and terrified about my future, and to the point where the numbing really just helped me not think about any of it.
Right.
And then there I was, and I started to hear some guys talk about how they started to share their story. And in my mind, and this is part of the enemy, I feel like, really trying to keep me in that lonely place. I'd walk into a couple meetings and feel like I could never just be a part of. I was either not as bad as this person, or this guy's way better than me. You know, so I could never just be one of many. I always had to kind of separate myself. Yeah. And I guess that journey started when I was just starting to see the similarities instead of the differences. So I would be like, man, there's no way that guy could help me because he's so different. Their background is different. Their life is not a life that I want. But I related in one thing for sure, is in that struggle and that emotional hopelessness.
Right.
And then what that started to help me do was starting to see just a few similarities. All I needed to do was hang on to a couple.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, kind of like we talked about in the beginning, like sharing a story that you can maybe even have some similarities is kind of what helps you get through it, though. You see that they're, you understand where I'm coming from. We've kind of been in the same place, even if it's not exact. It might not be exact, but that's why we're here.
Yeah.
That's why we're here, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
To hopefully have your story now inspire someone else that might be in that same position as you were.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
And I remember what my sponsor told me one day. And he's like, hey, you and I have more alike than you realize. And that kind of just opened the door a little bit.
Right.
And this whole process of recovery is just like, at first recognizing, hey, I can't do this on my own.
Right.
And then just this hope that maybe, just maybe, whatever it is working in their life, because we clearly shared some of those feelings of a rock bottom, right? The hopelessness, the despair, the frustration, just all of it. And then it's, just whatever's working in their life, maybe it could work for me too.
Right, and it gave you hope.
Yeah, and that's all you need.
Yeah.
Once that door's open, then the possibilities are endless.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, so then after you did your 60 days, right? Was it 60 days?
Well, I had to end up spending a year in center. So, I mean, I'm extremely grateful for places like Jason's Retreat is where I spent the first 5 months.
Okay.
Then the Third Tradition is where I spent the other 7 months, and went to meetings at places like Aspire.
Okay.
So, just really grateful for what they do because.
And that's awesome. I feel like sometimes when people first hear oh, it's going to be a long time to recover, they're immediately like, whoa, I don't want to go through that long. You know what I mean?
As if we haven't put our family through years of issues. I mean, what's 30 days? But it's this weird block that we have.
So I guess I've always kind of wondered too, because once you go to treatment and stuff, I know your life has got to be different afterwards.
Yeah.
So then after you get out, it's how, what now? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you change your whole lifestyle, your friend group? What helped you to stay on the path that you needed to stay on?
So the 12 steps are really good at, I really thought that I was going to go into rehab and learn how to drink responsibly. All those commercials, right? Don't forget to drink responsibly.
Yeah.
I could just imagine Captain Morgan saying, drink responsibly.
I know.
And I really thought that I was going to learn how to get a handle on this problem. I thought I was going to learn how to, get a handle on it and be better at it and learn to stop when I need to and say no to the certain things. And I had all this self-confidence in me. And then there, I got taught that self-confidence was actually part of my problem, And I know that sounds crazy, but what it means is that I had to completely surrender everything, and that was the scariest thing.
Right.
Because I thought, what about me?
Yeah.
What about my dreams, my goals? What I want to accomplish in life. I have to be a dad. I can't be committed to recovery.
Right.
I have to be, I have to go to work one day, because at that time, obviously, I wasn't. And I was holding on to what I thought was so much. And, a lot of us that struggle with addiction and are on the recovery journey, we're holding on, we feel like we're holding on to so much. Yet once we realize that we let whatever it is that we have go, we actually have room to grab a hold of the things that we need to.
Right.
These new ways of thinking, this new way of life, and none of it made me let go of my family or nothing weird.
Right.
I work. We have a successful business, beautiful family, and are very blessed. But I didn't want to let those things go. And I remember hearing in church, because I have a little bit of a unique story. I was already a believer before I even started drinking and using. So I had thought I failed God and I failed Jesus, and He would want nothing to do with me. So I was reluctant to kind of go back to that. And then obviously that didn't last long. I knew where I needed to be,
Right.
but so I never had the right relationship with God, and I didn't really lean on Him and rely on Him. I kind of compartmentalized Him for Sundays and kind of like foxhole prayers when I was up
Right.
against it,
Yeah.
and not really let Him do it. So I heard a lot in church, God has more in store for you than you could ever imagine. And I remember thinking that there's no possible way.
Yeah.
I want like a Ferrari. Does He have like two Ferraris for me, And I learned that it has zero to do with material and everything to do with real freedom. And, a real freedom that only comes through this process. If you struggled like me, only comes through this process of these 12 steps, because I thought that alcohol and drugs were the problem. Turns out they were just a symptom of the problem, because there were things long before that I had built up that kept me in bondage, where that became the solution.
Right.
And then so once I stopped, I started to get to work on all those things.
Right. And I feel like that's very common, that a lot of people are struggling with other things, whether it's, trauma or just some mental struggles or personal life struggles, and that's why they turn to the drugs and alcohol, And then, I know, just for me, grief-wise, I know how important it is to, talk to someone and, a counselor, a therapist, or whatever. Did you ever do therapy?
I did therapy, and I believe in therapy. I tried therapy, but I was at the point, honestly, where I was beyond human aid, and a therapist straight up told me, hey, I clearly can't help you get through this. I recommend recovery, and a lot of therapists would, and they can recognize when it's time to do so. But I recommend it 100%.
Right.
And we just live in a different time that kind of makes it's this weird thing where, it's like our lives with social media and stuff like this. It's just like a highlight reel,
Right.
Such a I like to relate it to like a movie. Preview,
Right,
where they just only show you the best parts, right? Then you watch the movie what the heck, So it's like,
so good.
and it's only our loved ones that know the story behind that post,
right,
and that post captures the highlight of the night, but no one talks about what happened after the next day or the ramifications of what went on there and stuff like that. So we live in a crazy time. And then there's a lot of medications people take, and we do a lot of Googling and self-diagnosis and all this kind of stuff. So seek professional help for sure. But this journey that I've been on has been one on, obviously I couldn't beat this by myself. So I needed help of someone that could help me beat it.
Right.
And that for me was God,
Yeah.
Yeah, that for me was God, and it's the only way that I've been able to do it,
Right.
So it's May 10th of 2018 is my sober date, and that right there is just proof that something that I couldn't beat at all. God has been undefeated since that day, every day.
Yeah.
I haven't done anything every single day my whole life that long. It's been 6 years now, and I could attribute it to that. That I could definitely attribute it to the fact that now I can tap into something that does have the power,
Right.
to beat it.
That's so awesome because, I mean, for myself, just in the grief when I lost Kyle, I don't even know why. I mean, I just leaned into God too.
Yeah.
I mean, Kyle was always religious, and
Yeah.
I was always a believer of God, but I grew up Catholic, and I never felt like I really connected in the Catholic Church.
Right.
And so Kyle brought me to a Christian church,
Yeah.
and I loved it.
Yeah, that's
and
awesome.
we didn't go much,
Yeah.
but when I did go, I did enjoy it. And so he passed away, and then he passed away on a Thursday, so that Sunday I didn't go to church. But the next Sunday, I went. I've gone just about every Sunday since he's passed. And even though it's like, I mean, I have all my own struggles, he doesn't just take everything away, you know what I mean?
Right.
But I have so much comfort.
Yeah.
And like just like really truly leaning onto God. I've never have like this in my life. And so I love that that's also what you found comfort in too.
Yeah, that's really where the freedom is, and I was trying to run from it.
Yeah.
Actually, the only way someone got me to go to a recovery meeting was, I said, as long as it's not like church,
Yeah.
And then they start off with the prayer, and I'm like, bro, And then I was like, I'm already here, and and then it just led me back to, in recovery they talk a lot about higher powers and stuff like that, but led me back to it actually helped open my eyes so that I can see the kind of relationship that Jesus wanted me to have with him. And it was more about reliance than defiance. It was less about believing in him and believing in God, and more about believing God.
Right.
Which is a big difference, such a fine line, even in the words, right? It's like, I believed in him, but I didn't necessarily believe him. And what do I mean by that? It's, I got to know his word so I could believe what his word says about me and my life and the way that I should treat this relationship.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We have a message from our sponsors, Aspire Counseling Services. We just want to remind everyone that seeking treatment should never be stigmatized. Aspire specializes in providing support and treatment for both teens and adults with mental health and substance use disorders, recognizing that these conditions often do coexist. They are an amazing resource, and you can get started by texting or calling the number 888-585-7373 to enroll at any time. As far as your family goes, your kids, your dad, your wife, how are they with you now that you have recovered?
Yeah. So I always like to say that I'm still in recovery. It's like a journey.
Not recovered. Yes.
But semantics, I guess. But those relationships now are completely transformed, and I'd like to take it a step further to other relationships where, and this is where I'm so in awe of what God can do, right? With a completely broken life. Obviously there was, and I'm not proud to say, but my addiction led me to be in a place where I was non-existent in some of my kids' lives. And, that journey back of getting that trust back, with my wife, obviously, we are in a great place now where we're both committed to recovery, committed to our relationship with God, and and now my dad is like my best friend, those relationships completely transform. So I would say to anybody, don't expect anything out of any relationships that you think you want or have, right? I for sure thought that there were certain people that weren't going to want to ever talk to me again. As a matter of fact, they told me that.
Right.
And one of them was standing next to me at like the biggest day of my life, and I could remember the day he walked in to that house where I was and said that, dude, you need to turn it around. I don't know what to tell you. You have kids, and I don't want anything to do with you anymore. And then now, he turned out to be my best man. And I honestly, at the beginning of my recovery journey, didn't even know how to face him.
Right.
And then it ended up being through a series of events that, the restorative power of God is just so amazing. Like, you can't really expect nothing, and that's a good thing.
Right.
Because if I would have got everything that I thought I wanted, I would have been selling myself short. You know, back to the whole God wants more for you than you can ever imagine.
Right.
Because I was fighting for, you know, supervised visits, let alone my kids living with me full time.
Man.
You know,
Yeah.
I was fighting for, you know, I was hoping that this person just didn't hate me anymore, let alone, you know, going through that process of making amends, being forgiven, and then being completely involved in your life.
Right.
You know, so, and then there was a lot of things that I was scared to face, you know, and this, you know, relying on God really helps you do it. And you're not alone. You end up with great people that you share your life with in recovery, as well as you have this new relationship where you can rely on a stronger power, of course.
Right. We've talked about how you got out of recovery and you didn't think you were going to be there that long and everything, but when did you finally get your success, you know? Like where you started your business, right?
Yeah.
And so when did that come along, and kind of share not even just all of your downfall.
Yeah.
Let's share your success.
Yeah, sure. You know, it was a very humble beginning. I was at a point in my life where I had kind of lost it all. So, you know, it's crazy because a lot of people think that, you know, it's just all about hard work and it's all about grinding. It's all about this. But the most beautiful thing that I learned in recovery is like how to live my life like more linear than anything, right? So I don't have to try to be an employee, a dad, you know, a husband, you know, serve at church, all these kind of things on like this horizontal plane, but really how to kind of just be one person in everything that I do, you know, and, you know, it's crazy. Someone called me when it started to become noticeable, like that I was doing better and stuff like that. And people would ask me like, hey, how'd you turn it around, man? Like, you know, especially when I called the people that I owed money to and paid them back, you know, and they're like, man, I'm really proud of you. Like, how'd you do it? And I was like, you know what? I wish that I had a more practical answer, you know, but it was just really a lot of trusting God and applying myself. You know, I thought that, man, once this recovery journey just kind of strips you down, that like there's not gonna be anything left, that this is all you're gonna do. You're just gonna be like this little, you know, robot or whatever. But it actually helped me apply everything that I've learned to every area of my life, you know, and you know, so you know, business has been good. You know, you take the good with the bad, obviously.
Right.
You know, and I've stayed committed to my recovery. Still help people with 12 steps. You know, lead Celebrate Recovery over at Discovery Church.
Okay, so you are involved in at people's recovery. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, sponsor people, all that stuff. Yeah.
Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually, you know, I like to say, you know, jokingly that you kind of get bamboozled into doing it because the 12th step is to keep doing it, you know?
Yeah.
I was like, all right, at first I was looking at it like, I just want to get my certificate, graduate from this rehab and move on. But no, it's really is a lifelong journey.
Right.
That we just do one day at a time.
Right.
You know?
And then other than like your now wife that kind of pushed you there.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't know your family dynamic.
Yeah.
Did you have other family members that kind of pushed you?
Yeah, my dad was the biggest inspiration for me.
Okay.
And it's crazy because I spent a lot of my life saying I want to be nothing like my dad. And then he kind of heard that I was getting in trouble and started to see the telltale signs. And I don't want to get emotional, but he started his recovery journey a little bit before me, and was always that voice in my ear of there's a way out, there's a way out, there's a way out. And you know, you know, he was the one that I told, hey dude, like I'm fine, I'm having fun.
Yeah.
This is after losing it all and everything. It's like, leave me alone, you know?
Yeah.
And he started that journey before me, and I'm really grateful. And he never really pushed me, but he was there to tell me there's another way, and you're not alone. And it's crazy, even though I was making every mistake in the book, he would tell me, you're an adult, in a free country, and with free will. So you have the right to make every mistake that you're about to make. But just know this, that even though your mind tells you that you're alone, that nobody's there, me and your daughters pray for you every day. And, you haven't lost it all, but if you don't stop, you will. And he kind of just kept telling me that in my ear, and finally, I'm so grateful, because when he would try to help me, I'd like roll my eyes and be like,
Right.
dude, you're talking to me about all this stuff and it sounds like another language, And then when I was ready, I knew where to go.
Right. Right.
I knew where to go.
And I'm sure that was kind of inspiring for you too, to see your dad start recovery right before you.
Yeah,
You're
I'm like, dude,
wow.
if this dude could change, if whatever's working for him can possibly work for me, like, let's go. You know?
Seriously.
Yeah, so it helped, and that was the relationship. And you asked earlier about separating from certain relationships. I didn't get weird. It wasn't like we broke up and unfollowed people and none of that. I mean, honestly, I was too tired to get on social media. You know, I just. It just becomes this thing where you do have to be physically separated. The best thing that happened to me is that, I gave up my phone for a month. I think it ended up being like 3 weeks, and that physical separation is important. But then eventually you gotta be out in the free world again.
Right.
You gotta be out in the normalcy of life, and without making people feel like they're walking on eggshells around you.
Right.
Like, oh no, hide this or hide that, or don't do this. I'm like, bro, like, I'm not, like, I'm fine, but I didn't need that physical separation in the beginning.
Right.
And where I can, like, kind of take a look at where my life was. It was a hard thing to look at the truth. The two things about the truth is it never changes, and it hurts sometimes, so I had to look at it for real, and then really, really decide after that what my relationships were going to be.
Right.
And it was never like this walk away thing. It was like more drawing closer to where I needed to be. And the separation happened naturally, where I can even say I still have love for some of the people that I used to hang around with. And, but it doesn't mean that I have to partake in whatever it is that they're doing.
Right.
I mean, one thing I'll say too, and this might sound a little tough, but it's like, I mean, my priorities were all out of whack. It was like, my priorities were like, I couldn't, I felt like I couldn't, oh man, but this is my friend and we've been through so much together.
Right.
But yet I was like disappointing the people that I loved the most, and my actual family, So it was like, I had to wake up.
Right.
You know, and I have to be a husband first, a father first. Doesn't mean that I don't have room in my life for friendships, but at the end of the day, that's my responsibility.
Right.
And most people, I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't want to hear that at the time. So that might be a little tough, but hey, it is what it is.
Right. Yeah. I know that wanting to go into recovery, you kind of have to, like we talked about, you kind of have to want it for yourself, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like as much as people tell you, hey, you need to get help, you need to get help, like, is there anything that you could maybe, like, give advice on? Or is it, I mean, I know it's kind of hard.
Yeah, it's actually not that hard. Here's the hope, okay? People are going to listen to this. They're going to be in one of their stages, right? And all we can do, and all this platform does, is plant the seed, right? Now, if that soil is fertile, then the seed will take root. And if the soil is not fertile yet, the storms of life will turn them fertile, trust me.
Right.
So who knows? I had to hear the message how many times, and until I was ready, the light turned on,
right.
And the light bulb went off in my head. So the biggest thing that I could say is that we have to grow, right?
Right.
And most of us fear change. But I would say just trust the process. Wherever you are, because a lot of people I thought that once I stopped drinking, life was just going to be dandy.
Yeah.
It was good. Everyone was going to trust me.
Yeah, everything
life was going to be
my
easy.
way.
Yeah. And I was like, well, wait a minute, I stopped. Isn't that what you wanted me to do? Now things should be easier. But it's not the case.
Right.
It's not the case. So I would say the biggest thing is to trust the process.
Right.
trust that still small voice inside of you that says, hey, this is this, you're in the right place,
Right.
you know. When you finally start to get around recovery or things like that, and be willing to grow and change. It sounds scary. It was scary for me, but it turned out, looking back, to be the best thing that I could ever do, was
Right.
be willing to do it, and go on this journey.
Right.
You know, and there's a lot of help out there. You're not alone. There's a lot of help. And if you are feeling like, hey, maybe this is too much, that is that alarm, that natural alarm in your mind, in your heart, in your soul going off, and that don't ignore that.
Right.
You know, because
Right.
I remember I could have saved my family a lot of grief, could have saved myself a lot of problems if I would have just listened to that instead
Right.
of all the noise outside.
Right.
From friends, from, you know, the scene and all that stuff. So I would say do that, and listen to that, and then
Right.
once you're on the journey, it's not supposed to be perfect. You
Right.
know, just continue, and you know, it's something that we can really help grow through, and whatever, you know, thing is holding us back, our guilt, our shame, you know, our regret, that's not who you are. That's
Right.
not who we are. And, you know, we can become different. And being
Right.
different doesn't mean being a completely different person.
Right.
It means being the best version of yourself
Right. I love that.
we
Yeah.
really can't do on our own.
Right. And like you bringing up planting that seed, it just kind of reminded me of a little story. So when we started doing this podcast,
Yeah.
there was a point where they were kind of like, everyone's kind of like watching the first episode
Yeah.
or whatever it was, and someone had brought a friend in, you know, just, oh, we're just going to watch this. And so after he watched it, like, he didn't know what he was getting himself into. He didn't
Yeah.
know he was going to be listening to the story of me and like Kyle and his addiction and everything. And so he actually was planning on going to like a festival that weekend, and you know what comes with that,
Yeah.
drugs
Yeah.
and alcohol.
Yeah.
And so he, a couple hours later, was like calling and saying, you know, I just felt like I needed to see that, and it like really impacted me.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to go and I'm not going to take any drugs.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh.
That's amazing.
For someone to come, and just one person, that's all, I mean, that's
Yeah.
all I want to do. If it's just one person, that's fine with me. But just that was even more inspiring for me, and to help me to want to continue to do this, because, you know, this whole podcast kind of like came up really fast and sudden, and I'm like, all right, let's do it, you know? But the fact that he was affected by just watching this small part of this one episode, and it changed his mind, and we planted that seed for him.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
So I think it's really cool. you
Yeah,
know?
definitely. Last thing I'll say too is that, you know, I'll be honest. I mean, when I was, you know, deep, I wasn't watching podcasts and stuff, you know.
right.
So a lot of the people that are going to see this are probably people that have that have someone in their life who's struggling,
Right.
you know, and I would recommend 100%. I know that it feels like that other person's addiction is a problem, and it's going to spill over into our lives, and it causes it, because I've been on both sides. I grew up around drugs and alcohol, so I was that person saying, like, I don't understand how you can't just stop for me.
Right.
Don't you love me, mom or
Right.
dad? You know, so I now having gone through that, I know that too. And as an adult, I went through a similar situation. So there's help for people that have someone in their life that they love that is struggling with addiction too.
Right.
There are things like Celebrate Recovery, a lot of, you know, and there's another one called Al-Anon, specifically for people that have someone in their life who's struggling, because it drags us down so much that they're like, our loved one is struggling with addiction, but so are we.
Right.
And we're not struggling with their struggle with addiction. We're struggling with our addiction to that toxic relationship sometimes. And then on accident, we begin to enable, or we let it really affect us. So and it becomes this same kind of bondage, right? So there's a lot of help out there too, for people like that, for people that are struggling with that. And I got that help for me, and for me it happened after I got sober. I started struggling with the relation with that as well, and I had to get free from a lot of certain things too.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I've covered all of my questions.
Cool. Awesome.
I'm like, I just really, really appreciate that, again, that you would come in and share your story, but also like share your struggles and your success. I think it's awesome to just give people that hope that you can turn your life around if you really want it, it's just something to give them hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Hopefully that did that.
Yeah,
Alrighty.
thank you.
No problem.
I'm Jori with Shattered Silence, Stories of Recovery and Resilience. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. You can also watch full episodes on YouTube, listen on Apple Podcast or Spotify.